when you're making a fire, you want to arrange your fuel in kind of a chaotic fashion, because fire loves chaos, fire loves to climb. So when the flames actually reach above the last bit of fuel that you put on there, you're ready to add more fuel. So this is getting there. So right now it's drying out that wood, it's bringing it up to temperature to where it'll off gas, and the gas is actually what is combusting. Now I'm above the level of the last bit of fuel that I put on there. So I'm going to add some more fuel, and I don't have to add 1 or 2 sticks at a time. All right, I can place those on there loosely and give it time to climb up and allow that to combust. Now while this is going, because I want to maximize the amount of time that this is in there, I'm going to go ahead and place this tin inside the fire and start cooking it. Now there's a lot of things that you'll read that say that you need to poke a small pinhole in the container, and I haven't found that to be the case. These tins don't fit exactly airtight, so as that heat is pushing that out, then all of the gases can still escape, you're fine. And because it's being heated and all that's being pushed out of that environment, no air is going back in. You don't have to worry about air getting back into the container unless the lid comes off or it's not getting hot enough. So the pinhole in the lid is not necessary unless you have a screw top lid, which I have some of those, and I'll poke a hole in those because when you screw those tight, those do become rather airtight. So that's when it's necessary. But most people char in an Altoid style hinged tin. The actual air holes where those hinges are is enough to let the gas escape. So you don't need to put a hole in those either. Once this gets going, I'm going to keep adding fuel. And I'm going to cook this. If I've got dry punk wood like I have here, it typically takes about 10 or 15 minutes to cook. You can char punk wood, a natural material that's wet, but what has to happen first is you have to evaporate all that moisture out, get the material to where it's dry inside the container, then it'll start the process of cooking and charring. And it's changing on me. That'll start the process of cooking and charring. So all it happens is it takes more fuel to get it to that level, if that's what's going on. I'm going to add a little more fuel to the back side here, because I'm looking for about 15 minutes of cook time on that container. And another thing is, there's no such thing as overcooking char. The only thing you could really do is undercook char. So you take it out and it's not completely black. That means it didn't cook long enough. But overcooking it is not a thing. So you can really throw that in there and kind of forget about it. No, overcooking char is not a thing. So we've had about 10 to 15 minutes of heat on this. This has died down to basically nothing but coals. And there's still a lot of heat happening in here, but for the most part, the flame is gone. As long as it's been 10 to 15 minutes for a dry natural material, you're probably good, and you need to cool that down. So I'll take it out of the coals, making sure that I don't open it, because at any time if I reintroduce air into this mix right now, I've completed the fire triangle and it'll just burn right up. I'm going to take those out of the coals and move them away from the fire so that it can cool. So now that this is cool to the touch, the heat has now been removed from the fire triangle. So now I can reintroduce air and take a look at what I have. And this char looks great. It's completely black. It's very light, fluffy, and delicate. So what I can do with that, and what I like to do, is check and test my char while I still have a coal bed. I don't want to let this go out and go to bed for the night, wake up in the morning to find out that my char hasn't been proven. It's what I consider proven char. And so what I'm going to use this for, this is going to work great for any resource that I have as far as an ignition source. It works great with a lighter, it works great with matches, ferrocerium rod, it works great with solar. Flint and steel, this will actually accept that cooler spark from traditional flint and steel, where you're taking a rock and banging it against high carbon steel. What I'm going to use it for in this case, because I have a lighter here, is conservation of this resource. The fuel is kind of the limited resource that's in this lighter. The ferrocerium rod that is in here is actually a more durable resource. You can find lighters all the time that'll be out of fuel, but they'll still spark. So I create that kind of artificial, situation by putting this zip tie up here. So that protects the lever from being depressed, the button from being depressed in my pocket, and keeps fuel from leaking out. Plus it also allows me to cut off that gas supply, the fuel supply, conserve that, and still get the spark. So with that, I take a piece of char, and right on the edge, I can take those sparks without using any of my fuel, direct those sparks onto the char, and without using any fuel out of my lighter, I can take that char, place it inside a tinder bundle, and now I'm using that char as my heat source, and I'm transferring the heat from that charred material to this tinder bundle. So that is what I'll use for my next fire. I'm kind of watching the wind here because I don't want the smoke in my face. You can whip it around if you need to. Introduce some more air into that mix. And I can take that and place that in my next fire lay. And it took 0 fuel out of this limited resource that I'm carrying. And this is probably one of the most important resources that you're carrying in an emergency. So knowing how to conserve this resource, or even how to use a lighter that you found on the side of the road without fuel, because it still has that ability to spark. Char is something that allows your next fire to happen that much easier, no matter what your ignition source is. So every time you have a fire, if you don't have char, you need to char material with that fire.